All right. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining. This is awesome. I know you and I have been going back and forth for a few weeks now. We spoke originally about Following, and we decided to kind of put together more of a formal interview to discuss that film and also your other projects that you've done, obviously, in the years since. But, the reason I reached out to you, and I'll tell the audience this, was one random day. I think it was a Sunday. I was just happened to be I was going through my Blu-ray collection. My wife and I have 1,600 Blu-rays, and I had never seen Following. And Chris Nolan's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch this. And because of the world we live in today, I could why don't I just tweet the lead star of the movie and see if he'll join me for an interview? And Jeremy was awesome enough to literally get back to me right away. We got on, we did an hour-long chat about Following and other things. I had not seen the other two films yet that we're going to discuss here today, and now I have. So we're going to get into kind of more details on that. But first of all, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me. For my audience, tell everyone where you are, because this is kind of cool. I'm in DC. You're pretty far away from me, but we're talking we're right next to each other. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm 3,000 miles away from you on a small island in the middle of the Irish Sea called the Isle of Man, which is 13 miles wide and about 35 miles long, and that's where I live now.
And the crazy part about it is I'm in DC, and we're going to get to a movie later on in your filmography that was actually shot right in my area using local people that I have worked with over the years in a weird way. And Jeremy and I didn't actually know this until we started connecting, that we have an actor friend in common, Robin, who's so we'll get into all that connection. But let's start off with Chris Nolan, Following, the big poster right over your shoulder right now. It's following you literally everywhere you go. But
I was never going to be able to compete on the bookshelf with your Blu-ray collection. So I thought I'd get this out. So
hey, to be the star of a Christopher Nolan film and have a poster, I would take that any day over my 1,600 Blu-ray collection. That'd be so cool. So one of the things I really found interesting about this film, and one thing that we discussed that I would love for you to explain again, was the use of cameras in this film. There were two cameras that Nolan used specifically. And I believe there was one camera for the indoor shots, and then use a different camera for the outdoor shots during the Following sequences. Can you go through those two cameras again and kind of how that operated for you as an actor?
So yeah, there were the main camera that we used indoors, but also outdoors as well. For some of the shots was a 16mm Arriflex. The other camera that we used, and there are scenes in Following whereby there are crowd scenes. It's in the middle of London, right in the very center, in an area called Covent Garden. That is pretty famous for shopping and for people to go and hang out there in bars and cafes. It was an old market garden in the 19th century. And there are a lot of shots there that are slow-mo of Alex and of myself. And that was with a handheld Bolex camera. There was a wind-up camera. And the reason for that was to be able to literally shoot from the hip. If you try and shoot with a big movie camera on sticks, you'll get people in the eye line, and you'll just get them looking at the camera as they go past, as they walk past, or they'll try and duck underneath it like this, and you'll just get heads like that. If you have a handheld camera and you're literally holding it down at waist level, then no one walking close to you who sees the camera, you don't get their head in shot. So you never see them looking at the camera. But on a nice distance shot like we have in Covent Garden, you get this beautiful effect of people just walking past. It's really candid, and so that was the camera that Chris used for those particular shots.
I want people to understand that Christopher Nolan is DPing this film. I mean, this is prior to the Chris Nolan that we know, and it's truly amazing to think about that. Kind of like the camera angles you're seeing in this film, and kind of what he then kind of utilized towards Hoytema and Wally, and kind of how his films then progressed from there. Legally wise, this is something I asked you when we first spoke. How did you deal with filming crowds like that? Because would you be able to shoot a film like Following today, or would you have to like block off streets and get extra approvals? And I mean, it's almost like a student film, but it's actually a really amazing feature film that plays like a very normal, amazing feature film. But I was just wondering if there were any legalities. Did you have people like stop you and say, "Hey, are you filming a movie?" And
No, not at the time. Again, because we were filming fairly, I guess, subversively. No one stopped us. We didn't get any permissions at the time. The world was different 25 years ago, and people were less bothered about being filmed and it being portrayed on social media. If you want to restrict a place so that you only have your own extras in it, then yes, of course, you start to need to get permission from the local authorities to be able to say, we can block off this area and you can do this and you can do that, and it's very time consuming and it's very expensive. But yeah, at the time it was Chris wandering around with this heavy film camera on his shoulder, and I think just about every shot in Following is handheld, apart from the scenes right at the very beginning and right at the very end, with the interrogation scenes with Chris's uncle John, and there's a tracking shot for that, and the others were on sticks. But apart from that, yeah, the Chris was DPing, the camera was on his shoulder the whole time.
Jeremy, you've in some of this part of the interview, some of these elements in this interview we're going to hold until later date, but you've continued to work with Chris over the years in certain films, and obviously Batman Begins was a big one for you to be on as well, and then and Tenet we can get into as well. But talk about your experience with Emma and Chris going forward after you do Following. So Following becomes a really big deal. It catches the eye of certain people in Hollywood. Chris goes on to do Memento. Talk about where you are at that point as Memento is being made, when that movie comes out, and then how eventually do you wrap around back into Batman Begins? Like, how did that relationship go for those years?
Yeah, I mean, when Following was starting to get noticed, Chris and Emma had already moved to the US, and Chris has dual citizenship. His mother's American, and so it was relatively easy for him to move over there. He always wanted to be a filmmaker and make films there. So when we were at the San Francisco Film Festival in 1998, Chris was already there. Following got bought by a production company called Next Wave by Peter Broderick, who was big in the sort of guerrilla filmmaking movement, and it was at a time of El Mariachi and Clerks and Blair Witch, and there was independent cinemas, and you could literally go to festivals. You could get your film seen and you could get distribution. Peter Broderick blew it up to 35 mil, took it to Toronto, did a new sound mix, and Following was sold there. It got distribution in the US, in the UK, in France, as part of winning the Tiger Award at Rotterdam. It got distribution in the Netherlands, and Chris and Emma went on from there to start making Memento. In the UK, it was kind of different. I got an agent, I got representation, and he was trying to sell me as an actor. It didn't get such a great release in London. It was in one cinema for I think 1 week, which was disappointing because it was getting 5-star reviews. It was Time Out's Film of the Week, and but there was, I was getting interviews. There were things that were going to happen, but gradually those calls stopped and the phone dried up, and I didn't get as much work out of it as I wanted to. So it was fantastic when Emma rang my agent.
Was that random? Like, did that just randomly happen? Like, had you like talked to her about, hey, can I be in this Batman
we were still
film?
in touch, and we were still in touch, and we were still emailing, and we were still talking about what was happening with Following and the DVD release, and the fact that we were then finally, you know, making some money out of it, which was nice. And so we were getting little checks every now and again from the distribution, and that was great. But yeah, we weren't talking every week. I didn't know what was happening. As you know, Chris is very secretive about his projects, and so yeah, it was kind of a phone call out of the blue to my agent, saying that he's doing Batman Begins, and do you want a screen test for this part, and
Wow.
you know, do something for old time's sake, and that was the most incredible experience.
You know, Jeremy's talking about Chris being secretive. What we haven't told our audience yet is that Chris Nolan's actually standing right above that staircase. If we mention anything about Tenet, he's going to jump in and end the interview immediately. No, but it's interesting because, so you screen test. Okay, you're talking about a friend of yours, somebody that you like came up with in regards to filmmaking at this point, from Following and Doodlebug and all these films that you worked on together. And then you're screen testing for a major Hollywood director at that point. But he's still Christopher Nolan. He's still the guy you worked with. What's it like to screen test for someone like that when they're like, I guess my point is, like, you know him personally, you know Emma personally, but now you're screen testing for a major film that people are going to be watching all over the world. It's a massive, I mean, the Batman is a major character. People are going to see it regardless of who it is or who's involved in it. Batman has an audience built in. What's the screen test like for you for a Batman film, but also your friend?
Yes, it's kind of an anxious experience.
Yeah.
You know, you want to do the best you can, but at the same time, you know that the person who's going to be watching this knows what you can do. So
Yeah.
you know, there's accent work involved, and we, you know, there was a dialect coach that came in and taught me some of the more sort of like finesse points of an American accent, of the standard American accent.
Can you give an example of that?
Point. Oh, it's R's. It's all about the R's. So we don't the British don't pronounce their R's as much as Americans do. So you have to really go down deep into the R's, into a park and things like that, as opposed to a park. So yeah, it's things like that that they teach you to do, and you work on the lines, and you know. But it was a fantastic experience. We were filming in an airship hangar in, I think it's Cardington in Bedfordshire, and this thing is absolutely enormous. It's like half a mile long and 100 feet high, 150 feet high, and 400 feet wide, and you can black it out, so you can do night scenes inside the aircraft hangar, this airship hangar. During the day, so you don't have to do night shoots, which are, you know, tiring and expensive. And the whole of the Narrows were built inside this airship hangar. The frontispiece of the Opera House, the 4 stories high, was built inside the airship hangar. And you know, Emma took me round, and we had a look at all of the toys and gadgets and the Batmobiles that were lined up. Yeah, it was certainly very different to how we made Following for $5,000.
Wow. You know, Jeremy, we go back to Following. As I look over your shoulder, I see that image of you on that poster. I'm just interested to know what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see that shot, like that particular image of your character on that poster. What's the first thing you think about?
I don't know. So that was, I mean, that's one of the stills that I was. It's a still taken from one of the shots that I was talking about in Covent Garden. Probably that suit was my dad's. That was my dad's wedding suit that I wore. So
wow.
yeah,
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow. Was Chris wearing suits as a director at that point? Because he always wears suits when he directs now. I know that, but like, was
Yeah,
he wearing?
linen jackets, waistcoats, and blue sort of like chemise, what do you call them, chambray shirts, and beige chinos. That was his uniform always.
Wow. You know, you're talking about one of the things we discussed in our first interview was the haircut sequence in Following, which is amazing because you only have one take to do it, really,
Hmm.
literally. But so two things on that. One thing that's cool about the Following. Actually, I'm gonna grab the Following Blu-ray so I can show it to people because it's such a great. Where is it? Can't spell today for some reason. All right, people out there, this is an incredible Criterion edition of the film. Weirdly enough, Jeremy doesn't even have this because they don't have it where he lives, which is crazy. It's an amazing Blu-ray. What's cool about it is if you look at the poster for Tenet now, there's like this split and you have John David on both sides. It kind of looks like the new Tenet poster. I was
Yeah.
going to ask you that because that Tenet poster just came out the other day of John David with a line dividing themselves like that. Did it kind of remind you of that a little bit?
Well, like you said, I mean, that's the Criterion version, which is the US version, and our version is different to that. But it's kind of a similar design, and it's probably, I would have thought it's probably deliberate. So
Yeah.
Chris
Breaking news.
has an enormous amount of input into this.
Breaking news. Tenet's actually a sequel to Following. That's what we're telling everyone now.
And it's a sequel to every film he's ever made.
Right. I actually am. There's a part of me that's actually debating whether or not Tenet is a sequel to Inception because like there's so many elements to the way that trailer plays. Actually, this is something I don't think I asked you the last time. If I did, forgive me. Did you get to read the entire Tenet script or just what you did,
No,
just the scene you did?
no, just the scene.
Did you have the
So I
ability to read it all, or did they just give you that?
No, it was I was sent a FedEx package that I had to sign for, and it's got my name on it, and it's on red paper, so it can't be photocopied. And even if it is photocopied, it's got my name and printed all the way through it, so you know exactly where it's come from, and the security around it is very tight. My friend James Mottram, who's a film reviewer and film writer, who's written about Chris a lot. He's doing the book on Tenet, and he has read the entire script, but that was in a locked room in the Warner Brothers offices in London with his phone taken off him.
Chris Nolan stood over him the entire 3 hours that he read that script. Well, so wait, do you, okay, all right, now I'm getting super geeky. Do you actually get to keep that red paper? Do you still have it, or do you have to send it back?
I left it in my trailer. Irritatingly, yeah, I know.
What?
Along with the sides of that day, I didn't pick them up. When I was yeah, pretty tired by the end of the day because it was a 5 a.m. call, and yeah, I got changed and I packed up my stuff and I got a selfie outside the trailer of myself that one of the second ADs took, and yeah, so, and I left my sides and I left my scripts inside it. I still have my Batman Begins script, and I did get the whole of that, so so I still have that.
Is there a certain weight to the difference of working on a Tenet versus a Following and kind of seeing those gigantic setups, or does it feel the same as it did working with Chris on Following?
No, it's very different, and I think, and I may have got this wrong, but we'll be able to check the technical aspects. But yeah, I mean, there was the 70mm IMAX that is a tracking shot of John David walking along Pall Mall and walking up into the club, and then it swaps to the 65mm Panasonic. It's not a 35mm; it's a 65mm.
Like he did with Dunkirk.
And
The boat was all
yeah,
65mm. Okay, that's right. So people out there, for our audience, there's 65mm IMAX, which is then projected on 70mm, and then you have 65mm cameras, which are not IMAX. That, like, for example, PTA shot The Master on that, and Nolan shot Dunkirk without the non-IMAX shots on 65. So all the Mark. And I remember interviewing Chris for Dunkirk and asking him exactly why he made those decisions. And his reasoning was actually because with the 65 IMAX camera, it's so loud that you can't really get intimate dialogue sequences because the camera's just like,
yeah, it makes a hell of a racket, and
right.
that's why if you watch the films, all the IMAX stuff is all, it's all kind of establishing, and there's a soundtrack over it, or there's airplane noise over it, or something like that, because you just can't. As far as I know, I mean, you'd have to check it out, but you just can't do dialogue because it makes way too much noise, and so then you use the 65mm for the close-ups and for the intimate and for the dialogue scenes.
Yeah, and that's the thing when you watch Dunkirk, which I think I saw 6 times in 70mm IMAX. Actually, oddly enough, here I'll actually show the audience this real quick. This is a hold on. Wow, this is pretty cool. So these are 3 70mm IMAX prints, air, land, and sea, of Dunkirk. And obviously you see, but this is the 70mm for people out there watching. And then any scene you see normally with Mark Rylance on the boat with like George and the characters, those are all dialogue heavy scenes. Nolan shoots those 65 because he doesn't want to ADR the dialogue. He doesn't want to ADR it too much. So I guess 2 other quick things on Chris, and then I do want to dive into your other projects because on the following Blu-ray, you can actually watch the film in 2 different ways. The way Chris presents it on, I keep calling him Chris like I know him. I'm going to call him Mr. Nolan from this point forward. Sorry. Only because I don't know him like you do. I feel like it's kind of cool when talking to you because like you can call him Chris. So Mr. Nolan, on this Blu-ray, you can actually watch the film in the format he releases, which is the nonlinear storytelling, and then you can watch the whole thing linearly. Talk about your process of shooting it, because you're dealing with a film very much like Chris's films, Nolan's films, that go all over the place in nonlinear formats. Did you shoot it in story order?
Some of it. So, I mean, there are 3 timelines that are fairly easily distinguished by me having long hair, me having short hair in a suit, and me being beaten up in a suit. And certainly all of the long hair stuff with a leather jacket on and the sort of like, kind of scuzzy clothes and stuff, that obviously was all done first. Then we did the haircut scene, and then after that it was split up. But what people may not know is that we only shot 1 day a week, and we shot for a year on Saturdays. Chris bought 1 roll of black and white 16mm film a week, which is what he could afford. And we would go on a Saturday, we would go to a location. Bill's apartment, my character's apartment in Following, is my apartment, and the blonde's apartment, it was his parents' house. And we would go there and we would shoot that 20 minutes, and we would try as hard as possible to make that 20 minutes last as long as possible in terms of the film, the smallest number of takes. And we did that for about a year. And so there were a lot of points whereby the whole thing was split up, and that's kind of normal in filmmaking, but you do it over the process of a month or 6 weeks or something like that you jump around. But doing it once a week for an entire year is kind of different. And when Chris presented me with the script, obviously it's in it's the version that you see on screen, with the fractured timeline, and I literally had to take it apart and put it back together in chronological order, so that I could follow my character's arc throughout the movie, and then make notes on that. And then when we were going to shoot it, say, oh, all right, you're in this scene, and this is how you look like, and this is what's happened, and so this is the way that you're going to portray it.
So Jeremy, I have so many questions about your acting specifically, and especially in these 2 other films that I watched. And so this is the final thing I'll ask about Nolan, is the person you worked with on Following. And I asked you this when we first spoke. As you sit in the theater and you watch films like Dunkirk and Interstellar, and then obviously with Tenet coming out, what is the one constant that you still see, that you remember, that Chris Nolan had on Following, that you still see when you watch Dunkirk?
There's a scene in Following with Alex and I, and we're in a cafe, and it's a heavy dialogue scene, and Chris would say, I want you to go up to this line, and then you don't need to do any more after that. And I'm sort of like, oh, okay. Because I'm still learning at this point. And I kind of realized afterwards, shouldn't we do the whole sort of like, shouldn't we do all of that scene from that shot, from my point of view? And he no, because he knows he's going to cut at that point. And he knows he's going to go to a different shot. And so he doesn't get 100% coverage in all of his shots. And it also forces the edit as well, because it means that it's gonna look the way that he wants it to look, because there simply isn't going to be any other option than to go to the other shot. So it's and all of this is in his head before he starts, and that's the genius of the man.
With knowing Christopher Nolan the way you do, and being in Following, as we're saying, are you able to email him or Emma if you have questions as a fan of a film you're watching that you're not in? So for example, like at the end of Inception, everyone has that question, which I'm thankful Chris Nolan's never going to answer. It's like Quentin Tarantino. I don't want to know what's in the briefcase. Those are things that I feel like the filmmaker lets us figure out. But like, you know, when the totem is spinning at the end of Inception and Wally has that brilliant shot where it starts to wobble, as a fan, as an audience member, we're all questioning whether or not it's a dream or not. Do you have the ability to like email Emma or Chris Nolan and like, all right, come on, is it a dream or not? Is it not a dream? Or do you just respect the fact that he's not going to give that information? Or can you even ask him those types of questions? Or do you just you just don't do it?
I don't do it because he wouldn't likely he wouldn't tell me. And we've had this discussion, you know, back through the years. Making Following, we argued for an entire year about whether my character would make it out or not, or whether he was going to be thrown in jail. Oh, wow. We talked about the ending of Memento when that came out, and the end of Inception is one of those things that you can figure out yourself, and you can look it up on the internet as to whether, you know, the totem is Cobb's totem or whether it's his wife's totem. So, and that makes a difference. No spoilers. But yeah, I don't ask him, because that's not our relationship, and that's a fan relationship. And that's not the sort of thing that we talk about. We see each other every couple of years. He invites all of the cast and crew of Following to all of the premieres, and we meet up and we chat, and we talk about the filming of Dunkirk or Interstellar or Inception, and yeah, we have a good chat. But I don't bother asking questions like that, because it's it's not that kind of relationship.
No, I was just curious, like, because you're kind of in that circle. I'm wondering what you're allowed to, but what things are kind of like off limits. All right, so let's move on to two films that I watched of yours. Celtic Cross first. So I really want to get into that film first. This is a 20-minute short film, and so with the beginning of the film, there's this Counting Crows line. And I'm going to actually read it real quick, which is, if dreams are like movies, their memories are, and then memories are films about ghosts. I'm going to read that one more time. If dreams are like movies, then memories are films about ghosts. It's a Counting Crows line. This film is so interesting to me because as it opens, and this is what I respected about this story, was there was so much emotion and weight already lived before the first frame of the movie. And as we get to the funeral, or as we get to that moment, or that the viewing, we don't know who these people are. And through the beautiful dialogue that's written in your performances, it's not exposition. We learn who the whole family dynamic is just through conversation. And I find that to be such a great storytelling tool, rather than just looking at the audience and just pretending that audiences don't know what they're doing, or they're stupid, they can't figure things out. And that's why I thought it was an interesting way to handle storytelling. You talk about, like, in the sense of, like, when we see your character for the first time, he says, you know, what in the actual fuck are you doing here? Which is the first line he says in the movie. There's so much that's happened prior to that moment. So as you deliver that line, knowing that's the first time the audience is going to hear your character's voice, hear what they have to say, how much weight goes into that delivery, knowing that's the first time we're meeting him? And, like, how is that something you think about, like how we're going to figure out what his story is through the rest of the film?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first line of the film, and it's an awesome opening line.
Great.
And yeah, you've got to put a lot into it. You don't want to oversell it, but it's a great opening line, and you want to get it across. And what's interesting is that it's a dream sequence, and then you cut out of that into the real thing. And there is, yeah, I think the way that Jack, who's the writer and director, put together this episodic nature of that film is really fantastic. And we did it as a short, and like you say, it's 20 minutes long or something like that. And I think it was 26 pages, and we shot it in like 2.5 days. So it's a real quick turnover. I was in DC for 100 hours from touchdown to takeoff, which was a complete blast, really. And we had such an enormous amount of fun making it. And Jack's now writing it up as a feature. You know, we're hoping to get some funding together and get that made next year once production starts rolling again on everything.
Yeah. So what I found really interesting was, from watching Following to these two films and kind of getting to know you, you're such a great internal actor. That's a really hard thing to do. I think that actors have the ability to emote to an audience. There's actually a shot, I think it's in Convergence specifically, where we're on it's like a close-up shot of you, and you're like, you put your character's head on the other character's head, but I think you swallow right before, like, you swallow your drink right before, like, you go like this, and then you swallow, and then you complete the head. And I was just, I know that's a random thing to bring up, but it's also
you noticed.
Yes. And so I literally wrote that down. I'm like, I wonder, here's what I wrote down: swallow, then fall on head. Choice? ? And so I wanted to know the choice of that, because it just spoke volumes to his arc. And obviously, as the character, we're talking about Convergence now for people who are watching. Convergence is a feature film that Jeremy's also in. And it's a powerful film about bereavement and grief and losing loved ones, and kind of how you deal with that, and kind of wanting answers and poking around in places you might not want to be poking around and things like that. And you have this beautiful relationship with a character who's also lost somebody, and you're both kind of going through, pretty, things that are very emotional. But your character does this weird, interesting thing. She puts her head on your shoulder first. You sip the drink, you partially, and then finish it. Talk about the choice of that. Is that an actor choice or a director choice?
That was an actor choice. That was me, and it was deliberate. It's partially stolen, an homage to Lost in Translation, and you see, that's where you've seen it before. And
my wife and I went to that exact karaoke place in Tokyo, and we sang in the exact room. And then I'll text you or message you afterwards. We have that exact photo of her putting her shoulder. I actually didn't make the connection until you just said that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, okay. But it is such a beautiful scene, and such a beautiful way of portraying two people coming together and kind of feeling a connection, and kind of feeling the same thing at the same time. And it's not it's not sexual, and it's not romantic necessarily. It's just that there's an understanding that you're both going through the same thing, that you're both in this weird situation. And And yeah, the whole movement was planned out and was deliberate and was mine. And I'm glad you noticed that.
Well, it's funny. I noticed that, but and I compared it to the emotions I felt in Celtic Cross when you say "I hate you" and then you go in for the hug, and I found that to be another like super intimate moment of like again a choice that your character makes, and it's like this like I don't know. I just found that line to be so devastating but beautiful at the same time when he hugs the character. But I'm jumping back and forth for my audience between two different films here, so.
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy, for my audience specifically, explain Celtic Cross just in a brief synopsis so people are aware of what we're referring to. This is a shorter film. Again, as you said, it was shot in D.C. We have a mutual friend who's in the film, Robin. It's a film about we're dealing with essentially a wake of viewing, and tell the audience kind of what transpires, because you're looking for someone to show up at this, but they don't end up showing up, but they do in memories.
Yeah, so as you said, a short film shot in DC, 20 minutes long, and prequel to the feature that will tell a much longer story. And the hook in the short film in Celtic Cross is the story about my father having died, and the wake and the family gathering for that. But my older brother, who was supposed to get the Celtic Cross because it hands down to the firstborn son, but he went missing a long time ago, and various people's memories of him and him turning up in dream scenes and in memory scenes, and whether he's actually going to come along and make it to his dad's funeral or not. And yeah, there are some moments of levity in it. There are some comedic moments in it, but it deals a lot with grief as well.
Yeah, and also one thing I noticed in these two films specifically was also there's a lot of use of handheld, which creates a lot of uneasiness in scenes that I think Chris Nolan does a lot in his films as well. There's a sense of like non-safety as we're in a handheld shot. Like it kind of makes us feel that. I was just interested as an actor, as a shot is handheld, do you perform differently knowing that there's a little bit of weight there of uneasiness given to the visual that we're experiencing?
I think it brings an intimacy into the relationship between the audience and the film. You feel like you're kind of sort of like looking in on someone's conversation, that you're overhearing it, that that it's a whispered sort of secret that you're party to, and I think that works really well for those kind of really highly emotionally charged scenes in Convergence. Like you said, there's a lot of grief in Convergence as well. You have to be aware of where the camera is, and but it also gives you a little bit of freedom, because you know that it can move around as well, and it can follow you more easily than if it's on a set of sticks, and you're not going to pan and too much or zoom in if it's a fixed shot. So it gives you a bit more license to be able to move and to be able to be more natural with those movements, and to get the intimacy over of that shot.
And Jeremy mentioned we're talking about Convergence. Convergence is a feature film. It's a very, very powerful film that literally made me question a lot of what I find to be important in life, to be honest with you. Like, I feel like films that tap into this type of grief. And Jeremy, as you know, I mean, not in a similar sense, but I just lost my dog recently. And like, there was an element of me watching your film from that perspective. I've lost family members throughout my life, but in a weird way, like that was the hardest loss I've ever had to deal with. And so it was a weirdly comforting film in a strange way to watch other people deliver the terrible things that happened to them, in the sense of like, you go, oh, we're all kind of dealing with these things. And like, your character has a great line where he's like, I didn't get to say goodbye. It was instant. They had felt no pain, my son and my daughter, like, and I won't give away like kind of what happens towards the end of the film, but you know, those were like, they're things you think about, like, oh my gosh, what if you don't get to say goodbye to somebody? But there's a great moment where your character goes to the, you know, that meeting, the bereavement meeting, and there's so many different people delivering their stories about who they lost in their life. And I thought that was such a powerful tool, and also something that I feel like your character kind of needed to experience, where he sees other people kind of going through similar situations. But those were very interesting moments. And can you explain what you were saying earlier about people just came up with like different stories to tell?
Yeah, so Steve, the director, wanted to do this bereavement counseling scene, and he wanted to do it in the round. So it was fairly difficult to shoot anyway. So there was a steady cam set up to be able to do it, and there was some over the shoulder stuff as well. Again, handheld, and it was Lenny Mullen's acting class in Glasgow, and people who were part of his workshop. He very kindly agreed that they would, you know, come in and do this ensemble piece for the film. And Steve just said to all of them, go away and write 2 minutes worth, write a 2-minute piece of grief, whatever story it is, whatever you want to make up, and you're going to have to be able to do this, and you're going to have to do it to camera, and you have to do it in the round, and we're going to shoot every single one of the, I think it's 15 people or something like that, or 13 people that are there, and then we'll edit that together as a counseling scene. And it was incredibly powerful,
Oh yeah.
and I got to see all of those and hear all of those stories before I did my piece, and boy did it help so much get me in the moment for the piece that I had to do. Yeah, it was hugely powerful, and there's a lot of really class actors doing some really fine work in that sequence.
I want to point out something for people watching this. Convergence has some of the most interesting editing I've seen in a long time. There's a very big metaphor throughout the film with chess pieces moving as characters are moving. And I'm trying to remember the exact moment I wrote down, but there's a specific one that literally follows the chess pieces as you're walking, like as the characters are walking by each other in a certain. I'm gonna stop for 1 second. I want to find the moment I wanted to ask you about specifically.
Okay,
There was.
sure.
Because there were so many of the cross edits, but there was one in particular that I wrote down that I wrote chess piece edit with walk. There was a tomato I wrote down too. The tomato cut was cool. I'm trying to remember now. But anyway, so I guess I'll just kind of go into more vague details about it. But the way the chess pieces were cut together were so interesting to me, because they followed the movement of characters, and they started actually foreshadowing things that you might expect later on. I thought it was a brilliant tool. Also, the sound design on the chess pieces was really interesting. As the character's hand would touch it, like this sound would come in, or the bass would come in. And there was like a powerful element to the way it was cut together. As actors, because those chess pieces kind of coordinated with what you guys were doing as characters, did you know about those movements of the chess pieces prior to the movement you did in the acting of the scene? Or did that just kind of happen to be cut together that way to make it look like that?
That's Steve's direction. That's where he's that's the thing that he's really good at. That was his vision. That was the thing that he put together. I mean, obviously in the script it talks about that particular character and the chess pieces and things like that, but it was his direction of again being able to see this thing in his mind's eye of what he wanted it to look like, and what the chess pieces were going to look like.
So effective.
And to make myself and Nicolette move in a particular way, and then he would go back to that and then shoot the chess pieces and make those move in a particular way as well. The sound design was fantastic, done by this guy called Scott, who's just one of the best sound recordists and sound designers that I've ever worked with. The most professional and talented guy. So yeah, it really works
It's a
on
yeah.
a whole bunch of different levels.
It's so powerful. There's a line you have in Convergence, which I'd never even thought about before, about the difference between an author and a writer. And I found that to be, I honestly never considered the difference between the two. I mean, you just say someone's a writer, you just assume they write, but the author writes books. And I don't know if that's a profound thing that I just never thought about before until watching Convergence. But can you speak on that line? And I think it's an actual really interesting observation that an author writes books and an author is different from a writer, even though they both write.
Yeah, I can't remember where that came from. I think it was Steve's line originally. We did a lot of work together. I wasn't the lead part in this originally. I was playing the publisher originally, and then the lead dropped out, and Steve screen tested me for the lead against Nicolette, and we had a long conversation about how that would work and whether it would work. And he said, well, maybe let's go away and read the script as the lead and come back to me with what you think. And I came back with a whole bunch of notes and said, we need to reorder this. And he was fantastically generous about working with the ideas that I had and bringing those into it as well. So I think it was his line originally, and then I ad-libbed it or improvised it and extrapolated it a bit, because that whole cafe sequence was supposed to, be quite an improvised sort of scene of us not talking over each other, because in the end, I think we had to ADR that. So because there was noise from the cafe was too much. But yeah, it was supposed to be, one of those scenes of again, of a really sort of like intimate, low-key nature that you're peering in on, and there's a beautiful shot from outside the window, and you can see the reflections of the cars going past in the window, and it's I love that scene.
The cinematography in that movie is amazing. And I will say this only because I just recently watched Following. There was definitely a bit of a Following connection I had when I saw you in the cafe. I thought of you and Cobb meeting for the first time in the cafe and Following. It was almost like shot in a similar way. Like you were just seeing you sit in that seat. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a little cool. I don't know. For me, it was just as somebody who had watched Following, I noticed that. But, Convergence is a film that people can actually find on Amazon, right? People can find that film on Amazon.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Video right now in the US and the UK. It's a pay for at the moment, and then I think it's going to go to Prime later this year, so maybe in the fall of 2020. And if you've got Prime, then you'll be able to watch it for free. But at the moment, it's like $2.99 or something like that to rent it in the UK and the US, and then it's on Vimeo and demand globally, so people can watch it that way.
Now, Celtic Cross, can people watch the short? How can they find the short for that?
So
film?
the short, we've only got the trailer at the moment because it's doing a festival circuit, and once the festival circuit has finished, then it will be it might become available then for people to be able to watch, probably on YouTube or Vimeo or something like that. But as I said, the writer director Jack is running it up into a feature, and we've had the whole cast has got together on Zoom, and we've had a couple of read-throughs of the first drafts of the feature, which has been great fun. To see everyone again, because we made it in January, and the world has kind of changed a lot since then. So it's been great to meet up with people again online and to read through that. And as I said, we're hoping to get funding to be able to get that into production next year as a feature.
Jeremy, as we wrap up, one of the things I find really interesting about your performance, as I said this to you earlier in the interview, is I find you to be a great internal actor. And in both films, and there are moments where your character has to cry. And I feel like actors get asked questions all the time, like, how do you cry on cue? How do you do that? But I truly don't know how actors do that. And I just wondered what your process was to go, and I feel like it's a loaded question, because I feel like it probably depends on the day where you were cutting your scenes, but are you a kind of actor who has to like dive into real things in your life to get that emotion to come up, or can you just kind of grab that from the character? Because clearly you're married in real life, and this character lost his wife, and I would imagine, do you have to go there to find that, or can you just live it as the character?
Um, yeah, so it's really difficult.
Yeah.
I know there are some actors who can, who can just, do it. I'm not one of those people. I've had the benefit of really um, sympathetic directors who have let me prepare an awful lot for those scenes and give you a huge amount of space and amount of time to be able to do that. And you have to go to some dark places, and you have to, to really think about some pretty horrible things, or I
Mm.
do anyway, to be able to get that emotion to really come out. I've got a playlist. I put
Oh,
AirPods in and things like that, and I will be usually in position, and the camera will be there, and I'll be listening to a playlist, and I get given time to be able
wow.
to get to the point, and then I'll make a motion. The cameras will start rolling, the sound will start rolling. I'll take the earpods out and hide them somewhere, and then the scene will go. And quite often, you just shoot and shoot and shoot until it comes. If it comes, then
Mm.
then fantastic. What happens, and I think Lucy's talked about this as well. Um, when she worked with Eric Roma, was that he was asking her to do an emotional scene, and she said, well, if it starts, it ain't going to stop. It's going to be a floodgate. So once you open it, it's just, there's going to be no stopping. So I'm just warning you. And it does get a bit like that. So yeah, it's not easy, but you do it to get over the emotion of what the character's going through, and especially within the bereavement scene, and the counseling scene, listening to all of the other people's stories beforehand, really helped me get into the moment. So that was very beneficial.
I'll end on two quick things because I know that the time is running out on here. But one thing I want to know is the book covers in Convergence. I would want to know how those do those get like made for like there's because your character's an author,
Yeah.
and there's a specific book that he wrote that ties into the twist of the story later on, which I won't give away. But
Mhm.
like, do you still have that book that your character
I don't
wrote?
have them, but Steve had a friend who is a graphic designer who made up all of those book covers for us. And all of the book titles mean something as well. So you're going to have
Yeah.
to go back and you're going to pause on those. And there's an Easter egg in there that I'm expecting you to get.
All right, so what's funny about that is like the name that still is ringing in my head is Caldwell, and that was obviously there's elements. I won't say anything to people out there, but there's some really cool things, and I'll have to go back and look for the Easter egg because I'll see if I can find it. Where is the Easter egg? I'm not.
It's
I'm
in the
actually.
titles. It's in the titles of the books.
Wait.
So there's a couple of shots. There's one in the office, and there's one towards the end of the film where you see all of the books laid out, or all the
Yes.
books on a shelf, and you can see all of the titles, and there's an Easter egg in that.
I'm gonna go back and watch that scene like literally right when I hang up with you. Bringing it full circle, the whole reason you and I are speaking today was because I talked to you from following forward. Jeremy's explained where you can find the Celtic Cross trailer and where you can find Convergence in full. Highly recommend both. Convergence is a very tough film to watch, but a necessary film. And I say tough because it deals with things that real people are going through. And in a weird way, it's kind of a cathartic experience, I found personally. That being said, the emotions that you dealt with in following as an actor, and we've discussed Doodlebug, and people out there who haven't seen Doodlebug, it's so cool. Jeremy does a great job in that. There's a little small version of him. It was so funny. It's really cool. But going back to the emotions that you learn as an actor from following now, what would you say is the greatest impact Christopher Nolan had on you as an actor that you still utilize in a film like Convergence? Like, what is the one thing you can pinpoint? Like, oh, I learned that from Christopher Nolan, working with him on Following and Doodlebug. I still use it in Convergence and Celtic Cross.
Oh, wow. So I produced Following with
Yep.
Chris and Emma, and as an actor producing as well, you're constantly aware of everything that's going on, in terms of crew and setup and timing, and whether you're gonna get all of the shots in that day. And the thing that Chris would say to me was just, stop all of that, forget about that, concentrate on the scene in hand, and just get that across. And I guess that's the thing that I've taken through. I was learning and following an awful lot in terms of film acting, about how big you can go, and how small you can go. You need to know what lens is on the camera, and where the camera is going to be, whether it's in tight like this or you've got a medium shot. As an actor, as a film actor, you should really be aware of those things, because they really affect the way that I will react or will do something. So those are the kind of things I've taken through, and I've just tried to, I don't know, become smaller, become smaller in over the years, in terms of reaction, to be able to get across the emotion that I'm trying to portray as a character.
Yeah, well, I think it's amazing. I'm so honored that we got to meet virtually, and I'm so happy that I got to watch these other two films of yours that I probably wouldn't have even gotten myself to in viewing prior to meeting you and knowing you. In a weird way, Convergence was just kind of a weird film that I kind of needed at the moment in a strange way.
Yeah.
And like, there's a great element in that bereavement scene where I think one of the characters says, like, what's the point? What's the point of going on anymore? You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's a question people have when we deal with loss. So, Jeremy, I unfortunately have to go because I have another interview at 2:12 in about 10 minutes. But it's so funny. I was like, oh, we'll go 30 minutes, and now we've got an hour, and I was like, it's gone by so fast.